Hey everyone, welcome to the MatchPal webinar, the Medical Student Research Playbook. We're going to be talking about how to get high-impact research projects as a medical student, the changes to the ERAS research section, and answering big questions like how to lead your own research project as a medical student and whether or not you should be taking a research year. We hope you find this helpful.
So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So as far as research, who research is for, we're thinking about the medical student that is interested either in competitive fields or competitive environments. We are looking at, students who are either junior med students. They may not kind of have any research at all, never did anything in undergrad, never did any research during a gap year. And, you're looking at a surgical subspecialty or even like academic internal medicine at a place that values research, right? That's the type of person that this call is for. If you're looking for like primary care, rural areas, or kind of, not really super competitive geographic locations, a lot of the stuff here is important to know, but may not be as urgent for you to act on. All right. PDs value research. It's one of these discriminating factors that are going to be used in the match process to, determine how competitive you are, because it's an objective number. Part of research really is objective, meaning number of publications, number of posters, number of abstracts. Like that is a number that you can be tagged on, similar to a board score and similar to, other numbers like your shelf scores, etc. That is something that makes a PD's life easier. The other thing that research does is it shows your commitment to a field, right? It shows the PD that, hey, you spent time looking into a problem that the specialty is feeling and helping solve it, contributing the limited time that you have to actually, getting ahead of that issue and basically, contributing to the field. So those are kind of the bread and butter, fundamentals that I think we all need to get on the same page on as far as research goes, and why this whole thing is important in the first place, to be honest. So I think, some of you may have seen these figures, some of you have not. So this is actually published by the NRMP. I have the MD and the DO data here. So I think I want to go through this quickly with you. And I want you guys to look at, this is every single specialty. This is actually from 2024. So every 2 years, the NRMP publishes charting outcomes in the match. It's a very valuable set of data about every single applicant across every single specialty that applied, and all their statistics. So you could see their scores, you could see their research, their leadership, how many of them have MDs, PhDs, MBAs, all that stuff, right? All the things that is objective metrics that you can pull. This is the research for MDs and DOs in 2024, and the 2026 data is going to be published this summer. So we'll have an updated number sometime in May. Now, if you look at this, I think a lot of this stuff maybe is a little bit self-explanatory, but I think it's worth taking a look at. Surgical subspecialties on the whole almost always average significantly higher volumes of publications for both MDs and DOs. The other thing you're seeing is that MDs tend to do a lot more research than DOs. And I think, if you ask me, a part of that is because of the availability of research at those institutions. So it's just much easier to get involved in multiple projects starting from MS1. And, I think for DOs, it's a little bit harder, which is the whole point of this webinar. And I think the other thing you'll look at is, while some specialties value research more than others, there is a component of research in every single field, right? Now, this is a total number of abstracts, presentations, and publications. And we're going to talk a little bit about the differences of those in a second, but this is a composite number of your total research output, okay? And what I want to kind of shed light on is two things. One is that for a lot of these specialties, the difference between matching and non-matching actually can almost be pointed at research involvement amongst other factors, right? Orthopedic surgery, ENT, vascular, neurosurge, right? Derm. These are fields that clearly value research to the point where there's a pretty significant discrepancy, especially for DOs, from those that match versus those that don't match, right? Now, I'm sure there are step scores involved, networking, away rotation performance, all that as well, but it's an important thing to keep in mind. I think the other thing that's interesting is that, but for both MDs and DOs, there are some fields that research doesn't really move the needle, right? So anesthesia, not really moving the needle really, right? Internal medicine, pathology, maybe even OBGYN to an extent, right? So where the bars are kind of closer, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe research doesn't play that big of a role, meaning having research on your app is important, but you don't need to have 20 publications or 10 publications to clinch a spot successfully. The other reason why I pulled up, I know we have a predominantly DO audience today, but I think it's important to talk about both of these in comparison because both MDs and DOs are applying in the same match cycle, right? They're applying for the same programs. And I think as a DO, the way I approached my match cycle was I wanted to be the best applicant, period. I didn't want to be the best DO applicant. I wanted to be as great as I possibly can. And so I think if you want to like really excel, if you're going for I'm in interventional radiology. If you're going for a surgical subspecialty, a field that really values a lot of research, I think you have to look at these numbers to be competitive. I don't think these are necessarily the numbers that you want to be striving for. I feel like you got to try to go for the gold for those fields because those people are applying to the same programs as you, right? The same ortho people are applying to the same programs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's just the point that I wanted to make. Josh, as far as the data goes, what is your kind of interpretation or anything to add for what students should take away from these charts from 2024?
So I think that these charts are great and they give you some objective numbers to shoot for. And you can go by match cycles, you can go by people that have matched before you and ask them about their experience. I would say don't be intimidated by some of these large numbers. Don't look at dermatology and say, wow, I need 19 publications. When am I ever going to start? The point of this research today, the point of this presentation is to give you some strategies on how to start and how to get involved. And so don't be put off by a large number. There are different ways that we can help you kind of get there. And so we'll talk about that soon.
Awesome. All righty. Let's talk about the different types of research that are available, that are published. Okay. There's, the pyramid, and this is like a hierarchy of like the highest quality of research as seen by the scientific community, right? Which is what you're contributing to. So at the bottom, case reports, right? This is one patient, one instance, something weird, novel, new, or horrific sometimes that you publish about that is basically not yet reported in the literature. It's the lowest strength of evidence because it's an N of one. And it's something that is not really necessarily translatable to a lot of patients and thus the scientific community doesn't value it, right? However, for you as a med student, it's a phenomenal opportunity. This is a great opportunity where you can get, your feet wet in the scientific writing process if you have no experience in it. And it's also something that you can easily obtain while you are working with the different types of research mentors that we'll talk about and how to find them, okay? Next is you have a couple of different clinical type of studies, cohort, case control, cross-sectional. If any of you guys are studying for step 2, this is like all right up your alley as far as things that you need to know. I'm not going to be going into the details of the different kinds, but think about it this way as like you're evaluating data and you're either following a large group of patients for a specific disease process, a specific surgery. You're comparing them maybe to a control, maybe not. Maybe you're just writing about the patients who have the disease process or the surgery or whatever it was, and you're basically writing about an outcome, right? And we'll talk. That's basically a very common type of like clinical research project for a med student to work on. Then you have randomized control trials. These are like the big landmark studies. These are the studies that are really like, they're blinding researchers. They're blinding participants. Some people are getting, for the surgical procedures that we do at my institution, they literally sign a waiver and then they get anesthetized and some of them don't even get the surgery, but then they get an incision, right? So like, it's like really, really like high level stuff where they're like comparing like the placebo effect versus not. And this goes for medications, procedures, all kinds of stuff, right? These are like the randomized control trials are typically the highest level of individual project research that you could do. Very hard, usually to get involved as a med student, but possible, but you have to usually be affiliated with a very, very prominent researcher at a major academic center to do so. And then finally is the meta-analyses and systematic reviews. And what that is that you're taking an eagle's eye view of a bunch of studies that were published already on a specific topic or patient population or disease process. And what you're doing is you're accumulating all the results of all of those studies and reporting it under one study. So if there's one study that had 10 patients, and another with 30, and another with 50, and another with 100, you write a massive review on 200 patients included across 4 studies, and you report that. And interestingly enough, despite it being the strongest level of evidence, it's actually something you could do as a med student. I published it as a med student, and you can too, and we're going to talk about it at the end of this talk. So definitely stay tuned for that, because I think that if you're willing to take on a big project, it's something that you could do without even access to an IRB, a medical center. All you need to do is have a really good framework for how to do it and, a good team. and understand how to use the tools online to find the studies and submit the literature review properly. So we'll get into that in a second. Until then, I want to talk about the types of research outputs, right? So this is the type of research that you are putting into your ERAS application, all right? You can list the project as a poster, meaning it's just kind of a poster on the wall at a conference, an oral presentation where you actually got up to the podium and presented your findings, or you can have a peer-reviewed publication like a journal, an actual journal article. And the kind of the columns at the bottom are all the different topics, obviously, that you can focus on. I think most people are going to write about something clinical, right? Meaning real patients, real procedures, real things happening in the hospital or in the outpatient setting that are, applicable. But you can get involved in these other areas. You can get involved in med ed. I know quite a lot of people, including people that we work with at MatchPal. They write a lot about medical student data. What is the medical student landscape of matching into orthopedic surgery? How are the match trends changing every single year? What is the effect of number of away rotations on number of interviews? This is all stuff that you technically, with the right mentor, you can do even as a med student. That is pretty novel. It adds a lot of data to people like us who like advise a lot of people, and then also just helps med students down the line in understanding how to be more competitive. I guess, Josh, what do you think, as far as pursuing each of these, is there something that you would say is like, should you go for one over the other? Like if there's a med student here who's never done any research before, maybe is just looking to get their feet wet, what type of project would you advise them to kind of go for? Or does that not even matter?
Yeah, absolutely. I think writing your first bit of research can be daunting. I think a poster presentation is always a good place to start. I think the better thing to do though is to get a team. Find someone who's done it before you. Maybe they're a year or two ahead of you and they've done it before, and see if they can help you out. I think poster presentations are definitely easy to get onto, especially at your local and state conferences. A lot of times they're always looking for more medical students, more residents. They'll bring everyone in. Oral presentations are along that same line. I would say peer-reviewed publications sometimes they can be a little bit longer in terms of trying the editing process, the submitting, getting edits back, and the final publication. So don't be afraid to do a few of these at once. It's fine to have 3 or 4 projects going as long as you have a good team around you and you have good objectives of how we're going to do things. And then lastly, on the medical education, I actually did a research project on that in medical school about like volunteering, and the fact is, does this actually help you in medical school? Does it help you get better exposure to clinical outcomes? Does that change your preceptor evaluations? It's just really cool to know and to help other students, like we talked about, of what's important. Is away rotations important? Is volunteering important? And using the scientific method here, we can really help each other out. And there's a lot of research out there if you want to look for it.
Love it. Love it. So to kind of compound the kind of annoyingness, without for lack of a better word, about research, I think ERAS did something that was interesting. I think some people have hot takes on it. I actually think it was a really good update. But basically, they changed the focus of what the ERAS research section looks like, right? So now it's called the scholarly work section, which is fine. Publication, scholarly work, fine, same difference, right? But really, what they did was, if you ever were a student that double dipped. So, again, depending on your experience with research thus far, you may not know what that means. So historically, you can list a poster, an oral presentation, and a publication as 3 separate research entries. That used to be a thing. When I applied, that was a thing. I admittedly did that because everyone was doing it, right? But now, because that was kind of viewed as like double dipping, you kind of were getting credit of 3 research items for one project. Now, ERAS kind of, because of program directors getting like, they were just like sick of that. They wanted it to be all under one bubble, meaning you would submit the title of the project, and then now underneath it, you're going to submit, was it presented here or published here or whatever, but it still counts as one project. And I think it's an important emphasis that I want to impose upon all of you today, which is that research is now a qualitative measure, much more than a quantitative measure. I think we're actually going to very likely see research numbers generally go down. And the reason behind that is because I think PDs and ERAS and the AAMC as a whole are starting to realize that getting, just because of inequitable access to research projects and people just getting into groups that publish like really highly, it starts to like almost become like a useless metric that, you just got lucky and you got to publish 20 things in some cases, not all. And that doesn't really add value to who you are as a person or an applicant. And so now it's more about like the how many projects did you do, because that is different, right? Truly, if you worked on 10 different projects in total, that is way more impressive than doing three projects, but submitting each of them to three different conferences. And now you have nine total research items. I know it's a little bit confusing, but I hope that makes sense to you guys. Additionally, the top three most meaningful sections. So in your ERAS experiences, you're able to, from like your leadership and your community service and all the things that you do as a med student, you're able to highlight those three of those things as most meaningful. You're also going to be able to highlight three of your research projects separately from that as most meaningful. So, if you're someone who does have five, six, seven projects, you can basically say to PDs, hey, these three are the ones I want you to ask me about. These three are the ones I'm most proud of. These three are the ones that I led or started or had really significant impact on. And I want to make sure that you see them and talk to me about them during the interview process and during the residency application process. So I think that that's also like all really important. The interface has changed a little bit. Again, I know ERS isn't open yet, but this is just something we want to give you guys a preview of because I think it's important to understand what you're planning to be submitting for, especially for the MS3s on the call. Again, you're going to be able to classify your type of scholarly work. Again, is it peer reviewed? Is it oral? Or is it a poster? You're going to be able to have all these different kind of areas that categorize, your authorship. Is it most meaningful? Again, the type of kind of collection that it's assigned to. And then furthermore, you're able to, again, here you're seeing how like multiple events can be added under one project, right? So again, this kind of mitigates double dipping, quote unquote, and just allows you to just showcase like, hey, like, yeah, this work was presented, but it's still all part of the same project. And if you guys have questions about this, just drop the questions in the chat. We'll get to them in the Q&A. This is a word on authorship. So yeah, Josh, if you want to chat a little bit more about, authorship roles and things like that.
Yeah, so word on authorship. So similar to what we talked about last slide, we said quality is more than quantity, right? We said that having projects where you lead and create a meaningful work and contribute to the evolving body of literature is a lot more important than being the 17th author on five different publications, right? So, as we see, a key finding showed that in 2024, program directors, 70% of them indicated that primary authorship was either not important or of very little importance. And so I think all of us medical students at some time or another always fought over who's going to be first author. Was it the person who had the idea? Was it the person who did the research? Was it the person who wrote most of the manuscript or did most of the edits? And the good news is that PDs really don't care. What they care about is your involvement, right? They don't care that you're number one, two, or three. They care about what you did and explaining why you did it and what you got out of it. It's a lot more important. Going through it, there's some differences. Primary authorship, this is going to be for your high yield, some of your easier publications, case reports, usually less than 500 words. You can get it done in a weekend. Literature reviews we'll talk about as well, that you can do if you have a good framework and a good support system around you. Secondary authorship, this is going to be your larger studies. This is going to be randomized control trials, multi-center. These will be your large academic institutions. It is highly, highly probably impossible for you to be a primary author on one of these, but it's better to just contribute what you can, right? Like every medical student, every resident, every attending has different things that they can offer, whether that's time, whether that's the ability to do research, whether that's ability to do edits or writing. All these things are really important, and it's we say medicine is a team sport, or research is too. So don't worry too much about primary authorship. What really matters is what you do on the project and how that, I should say, what you got out of it, right? So if they ask you about your project on interview day and you can't tell them anything you did, that's going to look pretty bad. But let's say that you're listed third or fourth author, but you tell them about this meaningful work you contributed and the lessons you learned. That'll look great. So don't be too worried about this primary authorship thing. Be focused on how you can contribute to the team and what you can get out of it, because research is not just to check a box. We're also learning how to read this stuff, and we're learning how to use this to make patient decisions. And that's kind of the reason why research is such a big emphasis anyway, because we're going to have to do it as doctors. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
don't
I
worry
think
about it, man. Don't worry about primary authorship.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. I think I want to echo two very important points. The first being that how you discuss it on interview day is the single most important thing, without a doubt. So when PD's asking you, oh, yeah, tell me about this project, it's about like, does your eyes light up when you can talk about it enthusiastically and eloquently? Because again, more often than not, especially if you're doing research in the same specialty that you are going to apply for, you are talking to someone who has way more knowledge on whatever it is that you're researching than you did, even though you researched it, right? So what they're trying to check you on is, do you actually get involved, and do you actually learn enough to speak about it at the level of a physician, a resident physician that they would expect who published something like this? And that's really the most important thing. The worst thing you could do is, I mean, obviously, never lie, never submit something that you didn't do. That's just absolute no. But the worst thing you could do is, be involved in a project and then not really be able to speak about it in that way during interview day, because that's the money shot. That's what gets you. That's what gets people impressed, right? Um, and I think the other thing I'll say about authorship is getting involved at any level is valuable, because you want to learn the skill, because you can leverage the skill of research, right, of scientific writing, of data mining, of statistical analysis. Those skills are valuable skills that you can then use in a future project, because guess what, nobody wants to teach you how to do statistical analysis. But if you learn it and then you go to the next person and say, hey, I've already done statistical analysis for a study like this, I can do this. You don't even need to, like, you can trust that I can do this. Then that is an open door for you that you otherwise might not have. So I think those skills, they take time. It's like, scientific language is its own, and the math behind it can be daunting. But that's what you're looking to develop, especially in these like lower level projects. So don't shy away from those. That's an amazing opportunity to get your feet wet. All right, Josh, talk about, you know starting at the school, which I know this may not be the most impactful side, because many of us might go to schools that maybe don't have robust research at their institutions. But let's say, maybe there is some way to find an opportunity. Like, what are those avenues that students can tap in?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a little bit self-explanatory, but we'll run through it because there are some clinical pearls that we can all get. So where to start is your school, right? We all pay tuition to medical school, and a lot of us have mentors there. We can find people with similar passions to us, and it's probably the easiest way to begin to try to find connections. So number one, find active publishers. You want to find people who are consistently publishing. If you go on their website and look at their research and everything is published in 2008 or before that, that's not for you. Even if it's 2016 and before that, it's probably not for you. You want someone who's publishing once or twice a year, has multiple research projects, is familiar with working with students and what kind of experiences they can offer and time and commitment. Next is align with your interests. So we talked a little bit in the chat about, having some projects from undergrad and before. And the answer to that is you can include maybe one or two projects, but you want to make sure that your projects align with your interests. So I'm interested in neurology. I want to include research I did on, a novel stroke, or maybe like reversing Eliquis with Kcentra, something like that. Something that aligns with your interests. If you are an MS1 or MS2 and you're not sure what to do, you don't know your field of choice, keep it broad. You can have multiple projects in different fields. What I would say though is by M2 and M3 year, it would be great to kind of narrow your focus and start doing some real clinical research, focus on your specialty of choice. And that looks different for everybody. But it is important, and it shows, like we said, your passion for the field, right? Like if I say I want to do OB/GYN, but I've never done any research in that, and I've only done research in vascular surgery, OB/GYN PDs probably won't look highly at me. So just take a look, see what you value. Don't be afraid to do a little bit more general in the beginning, and then hone your interest towards two and three. And then lastly, build relationships first. So you never know. what contacts are going to give you, and what bridges will help you later in life. So if you do a project with someone and maybe you're done with that person, don't burn the bridge, right? There's always a connection to be had, whether you're at school, you're at a conference, or you're doing clinical rotations. Some of the biggest things in medicine is word of mouth and actually, meeting these people and having good impressions of them. And so, even though you may not be doing another project with this person, they can help you out later in life. So that just goes to show you connections matter. One of the reasons we're doing this call, and yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think a great place to start in your school, even if you guys don't have necessarily people that are publishing a lot, like as far as like doctors or PhDs that are on the faculty, I think a great place to also get involved is your MS4 class. Like when I was a second year med student, I definitely leveraged the MS3s and MS4s because they were the ones that were already kind of like a little bit ahead of me. And they had projects, they had PIs. A lot of times, especially by the way, now at this time of year, an MS4, there's like no real incentive for them to finish a project anymore. They already submitted ERAS. They're kind of like maybe chilling out at this point. It's a great opportunity for you to get involved and try to help them out, round out a project that maybe they may have not even wanted to submit or finish submitting in the first place. So I think that these are all really just like great avenues to tap into. But let's say you don't have that, right? The next place that I think you need to start looking into is the people that you meet on the wards, right? So this is residents, this is attendings, this is department chairs, right? The hospital always has things going on. Whether even if you're at a community hospital, there's always someone there that is involved in some capacity with a project, even if it's small, right? This is a great opportunity to get those case reports that we talked about earlier. This is also a great opportunity to just like meet people in general, show face, express interest, right? Even if they don't give you a project, maybe they can mentor you, maybe they can help you in some other way. So this is just a great avenue to just meet people, introduce yourself, demonstrate your interest in the future in the specialty. Like people love meeting med students that are enthusiastic, right? So don't ever think, and especially residents, by the way, like residents, they almost always have like a research requirement and they may not really be interested in doing it. And you are an amazing source of a way to offload some of the work to them. So if you are, and closed mouths don't get fed, right? I'm not going to offer research to every single med student that rotates with me, but if they ask, then I certainly might. I certainly might. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing that I want to emphasize that a lot of people don't know about is the subspecialty societies, right? So every specialty has local and regional and national groups, right? For radiology, there's the ACR and the SIR for IR. Every subspecialty has this. It's really important that you get involved in these groups. A lot of them have research projects for med students or like a mentor match with people who are doing research. It's also just a great way to like learn about your specialty, meet other colleagues, get mentorship, and do other projects that are not necessarily research related. One of the things, I ended up doing a research project through the ACR, but I also ended up doing like medical student education guides, which weren't necessarily like peer reviewed publications, but they were things that I put on my CV that demonstrated my passion, interest, and enthusiasm for IR. And I think that was like one of the most asked about things on my application during the interview season. So they're worth pursuing. Look them up, apply, join them and get involved. I think these are just amazing avenues that a lot of students don't ever think about pursuing until potentially it's too late or if at all. So that's another one. And then lastly, conferences, societies, I think, obviously a big part of going to the conference is if you already have a research project to present there. But I think it's important to consider trying to go, even if you don't necessarily have one, because guess what? That's where all the people doing research go. They're all there, right? So you're looking for the most high yield room that you could possibly find, then that's where they're congregating because that's where they're going to show their work. And that's where all the people, all the residents and the med students doing research are going. And, it takes a little bit of proactiveness. Obviously, you will need to take, some time. There may even be a little bit of financial cost depending on if you're traveling far for it and staying in a hotel to go to an event if it's not local. But nonetheless, it's worth it, in my opinion, if you're really stuck and have no other avenues and you need research. I think these are events worth putting your foot in the door, shaking hands, again, showing face. And again, going back to our networking principle, you never know who you're going to meet. And even if you don't end up with a research project by going to a conference, if you do it right, you'll end up with a Rolodex of contacts and future mentors to leverage later on in your process. So I think these are all just like important avenues that you should be considering at every step of your journey. And there's really no time that's too early to start doing this kind of stuff. All right, Josh, talk to us a little bit about cold outreach. I think this is something that some people might be scared about, some people might not even be a fan of, some people might have tried this and it didn't work. Let's talk about doing cold outreach effectively.
Yeah, so cold outreach. So that's the dreaded thing where you're sending emails and you're trying to find a mentor. You're trying to find someone who we talked about it, who is a consistent publisher who maybe needs your help. And this is hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. There's a reason why a lot of people don't do it because you're going to get a lot more no's than you're going to get yeses. We have this in here. You're going to aim to reach out to 10 people at a time. That's 100% true, especially if they're not part of your institution, but maybe the local network and you don't know them personally. You definitely want to play a numbers game. It's just like in sales, the more doors you knock on, the more opportunities you have for yes, right? Don't be discouraged by the no's. That's fine. I mean, you're right back where you started. You didn't have a research project. They told you no, you still don't have one, right? So just keep going. There's a little template we put out there that's good for everyone. Obviously, you put a subject line. First, you want to start with why them. It's like, hey, I'm reaching out to Dr. So and so for their research in GI and endoscopic evaluations of H. pylori, right? And you're saying, it's fine to flatter them a little bit. You want to let them know that you read their research. That's 100% important. I don't want to just email every GI gastroenterologist in the area. I want to be targeted in my approach. So maybe I'm interested in scopes and I want to learn, hey, I saw your research here on techniques and biopsy results, and I want to learn more about it. So it's good to flatter them, good to show them that you're actually doing your research and your homework because it shows that you're committed. Next, you want to tell them why you. So first you tell them why them, and you tell them I've read all your research, and then you say why you. I also have an interest in GI scopes. I also have an interest in procedural specialties and trying to have the best outcomes. I also have interest in getting these things published and getting it so more people can read our results. I think that's important too. So the why them and the why you are the most important. Next, you want to have the ask and attachments. This is kind of the end where you say, are there any roles on your team for a medical student such as me? Now, this could look a lot of different ways. It could look like chart review. It could look like actual drafting and editing manuscripts. It could look like statistical analysis, like we talked about earlier. I actually was working with a medical student a few years ago, and he was actually a math PhD. And so he literally did stats for everyone. He had maybe 30 papers because he did everyone's stats because he already knew how to do it. And that's almost your secret way in is say, yeah, I'm very familiar with these types of analyses. Attachments is crucial too. So you want an updated CV. It would be great if your CV is one page, a little one pager they can read, has your name, has where you go to school, undergrad, some of your interests. And we'll talk about that in a separate section. But if you don't have an updated CV, that's another blunder. All right. So that's kind of your crucial thing is do your research, update your CV before starting any of this. And then finally, just close them, thank them for their time. I mean, all physicians have inboxes full of prescription requests and all these things. For them to read your email is actually pretty nice, especially if they provide a response. So always be kind, always leave a positive outlook because you may never talk to this person again until you're interviewing for residency. So you want to make sure you leave everything with a positive note. And like I said before, try 10 people at a time, right? So it's going to be hard work with this cold outreach, but if you do have a fish, if you do have one or two that say, hey, yeah, you can come on, it gets a lot easier from there. The first one's always the hardest. And then once your PD recognizes that and you start working, you show your stuff, they'll give you more and more opportunities. So put in the work in the beginning.
I think that was, I hope everyone took notes of that. That was like exactly the playbook there. I think I'll just echo a couple of things. I think specificity is really the thing that I would say is very important. So, don't just be like, hey, is there any research I could work on? Thanks, bye. Like that's really bad, right? Like You want to really showcase why you're there specifically. And again, to me, I don't even do that much research now as a resident, but like if I did, I would probably not answer an email like that versus if someone said, "Hey, I read your paper on this. Are you currently doing any other projects investigating this procedure or this type of patient population?" Like that is just so like it shows that you did the work, right? And that actually like that first this is a first impression. That's what you guys have to realize. Every time you communicate with anyone, whether it's for research or otherwise, is a first impression. And it's gonna really make the whole foundation for how people perceive you for the rest of the time that they ever engage with you if they do. So make sure that first impression is stellar, right? And that's all about being prepared, doing the homework, making a custom email. Yes, it takes more time, but I can tell you, I also got a few projects doing this. Okay. It is possible. It might not be the first time you reach out to the first 10 people. It might take 50. I know that's a crazy number. Finding 50 people that are qualified to do this and that actually publish and emailing them and customizing it, it's going to take you some time. It might take you an hour or two or three, depending on how good you are at it. But it's worth it if this is something that you need for the specialty and career that you're looking to get into. So I think Josh really did a great number on this. We can talk about more in the Q&A if you guys have specific questions. Let's talk about research here. I know there's a lot of people that talk about research years, are considering them. They're not really sure. It's kind of like a black box for a lot of people. I think most commonly research here is going to be either derm or surgical subspecialties. I think it's very rare that we see people taking dedicated research years otherwise. Now, some people take like academic years at their school. We're not talking about that. We're talking about taking a year off purely to be what is essentially a full-time researcher at either your med school if they have that or at an outside institution. So usually, again, it's like these kind of surgical subspecialty derm. Those are the people that are typically like coming to us, asking us these questions. I think the number one thing that I always like talk about the pros and cons list about research here, because, you know, the number one misconception is that if you just sign on to do a research year, you're going to like come out of this with like 30 publications and you're going to just be like the best applicant in the world. And it's absolutely not true. We've seen applicants get burned by taking on bad research years, right? So the same type of homework that you need to do to find a mentor using cold outreach or going to your school or working in the hospital is that you have to do like 5 times that level of homework to find a really good research year, because not all of them are created equal. And some of them are going to be at academic powerhouses where you will absolutely leave with a ton of publications, phenomenal mentorship, amazing letter of recommendation. And honestly, your whole career can be set from that 1-year investment. It's absolutely true. Those do exist. However, those are often the most competitive ones where there's a lot of people fighting for like maybe a couple of spots. And they have a very high bar for who they take, right? They're looking at people who already published a ton. They already have experience. They already have those skills that we talked about with publishing, statistical analysis, data mining, et cetera. And so it's a lot harder to get those. What there is also a lot of are research years that might be a huge waste of your time, right? So meaning places that are just kind of like looking for free labor. And then in the end, you kind of just ended up with like one paper. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, it's up to you. Some people are looking for like a break from med school, which I think is fine. I mean, it's a year of, you know, you are deferring a year of your attending and income, right? It's like 1 year less that you're going to 1 year farther away from like getting to that level, 1 year more of loans. A lot of these are not funded, by the way. So, you know, you have to kind of live off of something. So there's like a financial component to this as well. So I think it's all about the calculus for your individual situation, right? You know, what does your CV look like right now? What specialty are you going for? And what year are you currently, right? I mean, if you're an MS1, you shouldn't even be thinking about a research year, right? You should be doing everything in your power to publish as much as possible before that, right? If you're an MS3 right now and you have no research on your application and you really want to do derm or ortho, you probably would want to consider a research year. Like that's the type of person I would say it's really worth looking into, because it's going to be very hard for you to get any sort of level of competitiveness between now and September, right? It's only 6 months. Research alone takes a long time. I think that's one thing we didn't even talk about, like the publishing process. Even if I gave you a project right now, by the time you wrote it, edited it, submitted it to journals, got it accepted, and then went through the journal editing process, that's like 6 months right there. And that's for a project that if I put it on your lap tonight. So it's a very long game. It's not fast. It's really frustrating, actually. I take it from someone who's done a good amount of it. And so I think all these things have to go into your individual equation of whether or not the research here is right for you. And again, really identifying those appropriate mentors and research labs that are actually worth your time if you are going to make the investment of that time. I told you guys about systematic reviews. I actually did two of these. So I want to go through the framework of that I used to publish two systematic reviews. One of them actually was in like the premier IR journal. So in 2023, actually I submitted this as an early MS4. Systematic reviews are tough. And again, just to recap, this is a study that you do that analyzes many studies that were done within a specific clinical scenario. So I'm an interventional radiologist. We do these things called embolizations. It's a procedure that we do. Not going to get into that. So I'm really fascinated by this disease process and procedure. Always was, even as a med student. What I had the question of was like, is there a difference between the size of the prostate gland, and how they respond to this particular procedure? And I could have gone to a hospital and mined through the data and try to publish on the specific outcomes of this question at one site. But that would have taken me, I had to get an IRB. I'd have to find, people who would give me that data because my med school did not have a hospital nor this data, right? So I'd have to go and find this stuff, get all the paperwork submitted. So instead, we kind of got creative and we said, well, what if there's already studies that publish this at other centers. What if we just aggregated all those results and wrote up a systematic review on it? And that's exactly what we did. And it ended up being great. And I'm actually really proud of it. And I think I want to go through the framework that I did. So first, the most important thing is like the team and the question. Really, I think both of those are really number one. I don't think one of them comes before the other. So first, you have to know enough about your specific field to be able to ask a truly educated question that is worth publishing, right? So I did this as an MS4, early MS4, after already doing research for 2 years. So I was pretty well versed in the research process, in how to write, how to ask questions, and what the field of what my subspecialty was like doing. What was the hot topics, right? And then I think the other thing about it is a team. You got to have people who are really experienced in scientific writing, in writing a systematic review. You got to be able to lead them, right? The next thing is finding a search term that you can plug in that's going to give you unbiased results in a review database like PubMed. So, for example, we use this search term. This is the term we came up with. And again, there's YouTube videos, and I'm happy to talk offline about how to develop these. But basically, this term allowed us to include anything that had prostatic, prostate, prostatoid, whatever, any variation of the word prostate, artery embolization, and long-term follow-up, because that's what we were looking at. And then we got a list of a ton of papers. We ended up excluding, we had exclusion criteria. We had inclusion criteria for which papers we were going to accept or reject into our study based on the clinical parameters. And then we analyzed all the data from every single paper. How many patients? What were their age, demographics? How was the procedure performed? What was the outcome? And then we reported all of that in tables, charts, graphs, et cetera, the way you would see in a standard manuscript, right? I think there is a very specific way that journals like this stuff presented. My model when I was doing this was I read a lot of systematic reviews in the surgical journals, right? You read a lot of them. You have to immerse yourself. You have to understand the style, the formatting. But this is like a massive, I got asked about this paper at every single interview that I went on. And I went on 21 interviews. And that was like really awesome to be able to talk about a project that I cared a lot about. And I put in a ton of work into it. And I want to really echo that. This is a massive undertaking, especially if you're going to be primary author leading a team doing this. But it almost always will result, if it gets published, in like a really big, it's a high impact thing. Like systematic reviews are not easy to do. That's why there's not a lot of them. That's why they're very highly regarded in the scientific community. So I would say, if you guys want to talk about this offline, we always can. We could talk about it in the Q&A. But I guess I would just want to be a living example of that this is possible to do as a med student. And it is also something that you just need to do it properly, right? You just need to do it properly, but it is possible to do. But it's not for the beginner. This is not like I have no research. I don't know where to start. This is not what you start with. You start with other stuff and you go to this later. So, all right. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about MatchPal, and then we'll talk about our Q&A. And we'll let you guys ask questions and get involved. And, I know we talked about a lot of things. So our team, me, Josh, 50 others, we have people in every single specialty. We're all residents, and all we do is help students with the match process. So we help them with stuff like this, CV, research, networking. We talk about VSLO strategy. We do hundreds of personal statement edits every single year, mock interviews. We have like about like 20 people on our tutoring team that do tutoring for the boards. And we also have an OMM bootcamp for anyone who's preparing for Comlex, which is kind of like a boards and beyond for OMM. So all in all, our goal is really just to be a resource that we wish existed when you got, well, like when we were in your shoes, for someone that really wanted peer-to-peer advice, not from people who are like retired, not from people who are like PhDs, not from like attendings that like graduated 15 years ago and like don't even understand how the process works, like real advice from people who actually did it themselves successfully and can work with you one-on-one to help you do the same thing. We've actually been around for 4 years now, helped over 1,000 students. Every single one of our clients does really, really well in the match, from derm to family medicine and literally every specialty in between. And we're really proud of that. And so if anyone on this call is interested in working with us, you guys can just scan the QR code. I'm happy to chat with you. Someone from the team will chat with you, and we'll kind of answer what questions you have, see where you're at in the process, and see if it's a good fit for you guys to work together. Um, Additionally, yeah, definitely take a picture. We have a discount code up here as well. But yeah, thank you guys for your time and attention. And please drop your comments in the chat. We'll also give you guys the opportunity to unmute and see if you want to ask any questions that way as well. Please get involved. We're definitely here for it. I think we have one question here. The best way to develop appropriate search terms. Is there a resource for this? So yeah, I think Natalie, great question. I would start by looking at systematic reviews that are conducted in the field of interest, right? So whatever field you're interested in, go into the premier journal, go to just the systematic review section and start reading. Just start reading, looking at how did they develop, like what kind of questions are they asking, what kind of search. It's all public. You have to publish the search terms. So look at those search terms, look at what people are, how they're doing it, and try to start formulating your own based on a specific topic that you're interested in. There are also, I'm sure, I can't cite one off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are like YouTube videos. And again, if you guys want to talk offline, I'm more than happy to kind of navigate you through this. But this is something that is really best geared towards a like specialty matched person, like me as a interventional radiologist. Probably not going to be the best resource for like a non-radiology question for like how to come up with this kind of thing. Like this is where a derm advisor from our team would be like a tremendous resource for answering a question like that. All right. Could you please give an example of how you should respond when asked about your research work, a framework? So for the interview, I'm assuming this person is asking about the interview. I think the main thing that you want to think about is, your basically why you did the project, your level of involvement, a quick summary of the findings, and why it matters. I think those are kind of like the main things that I would go for when talking about it specifically on interview day. All right, Val, public health, maybe even crossing the line of sociology research be okay? What do you think, Josh?
I definitely think public health could be fine. I think sociology is fine as well. Public health is probably a bit more related. I think that's a unique research topic that not everyone has. I would say clinical vignettes are probably going to be your bang for your buck and a little bit more science medical based. But I think public health is fine. I had a few public healths on mine as well, especially related to some primary care specialties that they really, really liked. So definitely there's a role for that, but I would also expand to some maybe more scientific, more treatment led, and some outcome based research as well.
Yeah. I think all research is good, and again, if you are if you're truly passionate about this, it depends on the specialty you're going into, obviously, and how much it translates. But I think if you're really passionate about it, and that's like the platform that you're going to build we've had like VSLO webinars and other things where we talk about like specific strategies for interviews and ERAS and stuff. But like you can build a brand, right? And that's totally fine. My brand was education. I loved teaching. I loved tutoring. I loved mentoring. I did tons of it. That was my brand the entire time that I applied to residency. And so if your brand is going to be this topic, I think it's totally fine to concentrate your research efforts on that topic as long as you end up selling it appropriately down the road on interviews and on, during your personal statement and stuff like that.
Yeah, Dan, I think you're totally right. If that's what you want to do later in life, say you want to do infectious disease or you want to do primary care, that makes total sense. But just make sure it's aligned with your interests and your specialty. Perfect answer.
Awesome. So we have a couple more. So Alan said, given the shift from quantity to quality, how strictly should we aim to hit those research outputs? That's a good question. You know, I will say it's going to be very hard to say because we don't know what the impact is because this just rolled out for the current MS3 class. So even the MS4s who already applied this cycle, they weren't affected by this research change. So I don't know yet. I would say to be safe, go for those numbers to be safe, right? Because I can't give you a better answer than that right now. Peer reviewed, can you elaborate on peer reviewed? Could I rework something to submit as coursework in grad school if published through a journal and release? Yeah, sure. If it's published in a journal, it's peer reviewed, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. So if it's published in a journal, it's peer reviewed. If it's not published in a journal, then it's not peer reviewed. That doesn't really matter what it is at that point. If you have a mentor, how do you guide the relationship to prioritize research? My PD is in the specialty, telling me I don't need what I don't know what specialty you're in, but that's interesting. It's unfortunate. I would say if your specialty historically is a high research specialty, probably find guidance elsewhere. That sounds like bad advice. If your specialty is not a high research specialty, then that's fine. It seems like it's, reasonable. I don't know if Josh, if you have any other kind of
Yeah,
insights on that,
something
but
else we say here at MatchPal a lot is like not all mentors are used for the same thing. You're gonna have
correct.
multiple mentors. There's not gonna be one person that gives you everything. People are gonna have different strengths, whether that be research, whether that be involvement in local state chapters, whether that be involvement at the hospital you work at. So don't be afraid to keep recruiting people onto your team and to keep forming those relationships. Yeah, it's unfortunate that maybe they're not giving you research, but you can definitely find someone else that might have more exposure in that field.
Love it. Love it. All right, let's see. Um, we do not learn about, oh, this is a great question. We do not learn about stats until OMS 2. As a non-stats person, what's a good resource to learn to do the reviews and analyses? YouTube. You can learn anything on YouTube. So definitely start at YouTube. I think it's not it may not be the answer that you want to hear, but it's the true answer. You got to just get familiar with the terms, with the formulas, with the different types of statistical analyses. I know for a fact that there's tons of YouTube content on this for free. It just takes time to develop that. Now, learning it in theory versus applying it to data is obviously two different things. But at least if you know the theory of it and like when to apply certain statistical analyses to certain data sets and certain study types, you already become a more valuable person than someone who doesn't know that, right? So I think that's probably in my guess is probably that's the best place to start for learning specifically math, stats, all that stuff. How would you weigh the value of doing basic science research? Actually think it's valued less personally. I know it's like more time intensive. It's probably valued less because there's like almost always less immediate translatability, and there's also less relatability by the like during interview season. If you tell me about some like weird, maybe not weird, but like if you tell me about some like very niche molecular biology thing, it's going to be very hard for me to like understand you or relate to it versus if you tell me about like, hey, patient with this problem, this is how we solved it, or this is what we found, right? It's just a harder topic. So that's my take. I think everyone's going to be different. Maybe some people will, maybe like the super academic places maybe will value it highly, but I think on the whole, to me, it feels like a less relatable thing.
Yeah, I would echo that. Also, remember your PDs are doing these interviews and then going off to clinic and then going off to the wards and all this stuff. And so it's really interesting, but it's probably better to be relatable to them. Hey, I have this patient with this complex disease, weird hospitalization versus the, biomechanics of this and that. I think we got to remember that while we're like so focused on this research and all this stuff that we're doing for our application, we're talking to people who are giving us maybe 2 hours out of their day. So we want to make sure that's palatable for them and that they actually take away something from what we're doing.
100%. I think narrative reviews are viewed probably less than systematic reviews. Less data, less value. We don't actually have research opportunities as part of our platform. We're more like mentorship, advising, coaching, tutoring, success support. But we might in the future. Who knows? All right. I think we got time for one more question. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to like aggressively pursue bench work, you know? Um, I don't think, I think, yeah, I think I agree with what Josh said. Um, for medical students in their first year, realistic ways to get involved in IR case studies or reports, you got to reach out. You got to reach out to people. You're most likely not going to find it anywhere other than like reaching out to actual IRs doing cases. It's going to be really, really hard. How long did it take me to do the systematic review? I think from like when we started the process to when we submitted it, forget about not counting all the time it's spent going back and forth with the journal, editing it and whatever. But like, I think it was like 6 months. And that was with like an amazing team of like 5 rock star people. So it's a long time.
That's pretty
It's definitely
fast, actually.
a
Honestly, that's pretty fast.
yeah, it's a big undertaking. It's a big undertaking. Um, are there any specific requirements for research? Yeah, they vary. Everything varies. You got to look at the NRMP data for that. And a publication of medical communications textbook. I think like generally like publishing a textbook chapter is pretty cool. Like so like not that many people do it. So if you can publish on a chapter that is related to your specialty and you actually made like a meaningful contribution to like a textbook, even though my opinion is like nobody really reads textbooks anymore, but like it's a pretty cool opportunity. And I think it definitely will give you a research item. One, two, it'll also give you like a lot of in-depth knowledge on something that is probably very applicable to your career as a clinician. So I think it's a really cool use and opportunity. But yeah.
Yeah,
All
just
right,
make sure
guys.
to build your
I'll let,
brand.
I'll let Josh. Wait, what do you want to say, Josh?
I would say same thing. Just make sure to build your brand. Like whatever textbook chapter it is, make sure it's actually meaningful to you.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here because we're on the hour. Thank you guys all for joining. Thanks, Josh, for joining me. Like I said, if you guys want to scan the QR code and chat with us, we're more than happy to do that offline. But see you at the next one, and good luck out there. And reach out if you have any questions. All right.